Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Ask the Experts, Building a Framework for Technology Change in 2020. My name is Kyla Natali, and I will be moderating the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available to all attendees within the next 24 hours. Now, we want this to be as interactive as possible, so we encourage you to ask questions via the question pane, and at the end of the webinar, the presenters will address your questions. With those housekeeping items out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Both have an extensive history of enacting technology change and best practices for today's leading design and construction firms. Aaron Kivett is the Director of Partnerships with Newforma. Before joining the company, he spent 9 years at B&IM Architects in Kansas City. He then joined Newforma and has dedicated his time to helping global architecture, engineering, and construction firms solve critical project information management problems. Nathan Wood is the Executive Director for the Construction Progress Coalition. He is responsible for developing and growing CPC's mission and vision. Nathan also serves as the Chief Enabling Officer of Spectrum AEC, helping organizations and project teams break down the barriers to digital transformation by developing strategic action plans to address the challenges between people, process, and technology. I'd like to turn it over to Aaron and Nathan for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Kyla. I'm really happy to be here today to talk more about how Newforma is helping to transform digital processes in the AEC industry today.
Looking forward, Aaron. Let's go.
So Newforma was founded in 2004, specifically to empower architects, engineers, contractors, and owners to manage project data and streamline workflows. Newforma has really transformed the industry with over 186 of the top 500 design firms in the ENR and almost all of the top architectural firms in the UK and the US. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of these firms to help them design better workflows and digital practices. So Newforma can help them achieve, better projects faster and with less frustration and friction. Newforma Project Center itself helps bring together project management tools with information management tools. So things like, design tools like Revit or AutoCAD, marrying those together with the actual information that makes up the decisions that go into those models that are taking place in meeting notes or Outlook. We help connect those information silos, help project teams collaborate on files, and make better decisions so that, like I said earlier, deliver projects on time, maximize profitability, and minimize risk.
So quick background on the history of Construction Progress Coalition. So originally, starting back in 2011 timeframe, two organizations came together, the Construction Open Standards Alliance, COSA, and the Construction PDF Coalition. So I was originally one of the founders of the 12 general contractors meeting prior to a Bluebeam Extreme conference to talk about our shared pains with different PDF drawing output from Revit and other tools, and came to learn that really the challenge was more in workflow and in data standards than it was in the capability of the technology. So I really started looking at the different workflows, RFIs, submittals, and the role that BIM plays in creating better drawings and better data, and collaborating that together. So in 2017 and moving forward, have combined forces into the 501c3 Construction Progress Coalition, really founded around a combination of thought leadership, certification of existing open interoperability standards, and really promoting our vision, which is really around rebaselining how we measure project delivery. And actually, I think that's on the next slide here, Aaron. So yeah, our vision here, redefining the performance benchmarks for construction project delivery by bringing together those different AECO perspectives and the different technology providers to create an ecosystem of shared data and on sort of that path towards a common data environment. So really our mission and how we believe that this industry can get to different variations of a common data environment is through a CDX, or a common data exchange. It's really that language that we'll use to articulate different integrations like the Procore and Newforma integration, other things that we'll get into later.
Great, thank you both. So to begin, the top technology and project information challenges that were uncovered in Newforma's State of Technology Executive Report really shed light on areas where firms are still challenged in their daily responsibilities and tasks. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, this report explored the software preferences of design and construction firms, which ultimately unveiled the varied and disparate technology ecosystems of today's architecture, engineering, and construction organizations. So I'd like to begin by asking you, Aaron and Nathan, judging by the data on the screen, what do you think is contributing to the challenges that were uncovered in this report?
So I think, if you ask me, I would look at the administrative workload and some of these project workflow challenges, and this dilemma between, if you're an IT manager or if you're someone on an executive, you'd like to see everything in one place and have a one size fits all. But I think the reality of especially larger organizations is different folks are going to need different tools. And so, how do you create sort of that combination of a best of breed of different tools, but ultimately being able to keep all your data in one place? I mean, it's a challenge for everybody. So I think that's really reflected here.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. Also, the administrative workflow, these are things that people don't generally like to do. They like to design new things and solve problems for clients, not re-enter data or file emails. So a lot of these challenges specifically relate to again the kind of the not fun parts of people's jobs.
Yeah, and I think this really reflects a lot of the data that we found in previous reports from the National Institute of Standards and Technology that identified the $15.8 billion in interoperability waste that we create. That number one driver there being manually reentry of data from application to application. And so as we increasingly have more and more stakeholders coming together to deliver these projects, they're going to have their platform of choice, and those platforms need to be able to communicate data efficiently. Otherwise, we're not really solving the problem of efficiency. We're just creating more problems.
Yes, I think those problems, when you look at those challenges that those things create, a lot of that double data entry, shows up here in the administrative tasks column here, and flowing out of that, are some of these other related things like the ability to maintain audit trails if a lot of data is being double entered. You really that becomes a lot harder to do when people are not communicating, which is why you have to do it. And sharing files with other project team members is something that has to be done all the time on projects. So these types of challenges really all come down to collaborating with not only people within your company, but other companies working on that project team.
Absolutely. And so, I think one of the challenges, that was mentioned there was just, field accessibility of data. And now that everything is on mobile devices and all this collaboration, but we still find ourselves, despite that ability, facing this, manual entry of if a general contractor is, let's say, using Procore and the architect or engineer is using Newforma, despite the email automations and great features, there is still that manual rekeying or copy and pasting of data that we want to try and eliminate. And when we don't eliminate that, what can end up happening is actually a compounding risk. And so if run that animation through here, yeah, what we'll see is if that's creating double entry, and as we all know how busy everybody is these days, oftentimes that project manager will abandon their Newforma system, which is a huge risk because it's just, the path of least resistance is to go directly to that Procore system if that were to be required on that project. So I think that's where it's really great to see these kind of cross-platform integrations that can both reduce the duplicate entry and also eliminate that risk of not having your own data retention.
Yeah, Nathan, and I think that happens in reverse as well, where you know, Newforma, the architect or the designer might be stronger getting Newforma used on the project, so the contractor will become much less diligent about tracking and managing things on their side of the project. So this idea that one side will just rely on the other side's system for record keeping because it's easier is a big problem that we face here.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I mean, the solution to that, I think, is really twofold. There's where the places where we're currently creating what we'd say, an analog to digital workflow where we're manually rekeying or writing on a piece of paper and having to transcribe that in and having data losses. There is one opportunity, as well as also the opportunities that we were just describing before, where both systems are digital, but there's sort of a breakdown in that digital to digital workflow. Which can create the analog. And so it's interesting to kind of use that analogy of where are the areas where we have analog data breakdowns, even though it may be an electronic communication, but is it a truly digital transfer? That's the kind of the age that we're in and the efficiencies that we're going to need to go through this transformation.
Yeah, when I think about this slide, Nathan, I think about sort of the past transitions in the industry when we used to, FedEx these documents around.
Yep.
They would get lost in the mail, and now what happens is, we converted those drawings to PDFs and emailed them, and now they get lost in my inbox. So
exactly,
taking out that human element of actually moving the data around is key to what we're talking about here. And at Newforma, we look at these integrations that we have with our product at really two different levels. We argue internally about how to label them. So if you think about the first one as internal or horizontal, there are a lot of tools that a design team might use, like Revit or Deltek Vision, or tools that are within that organization. They're internal tools. I want to have all of those different things connected together to minimize the amount of sort of internal confusion caused by having all of these different tools to get things done. But and Newforma's had these for a long time. You could think of our Outlook integration as one of these horizontal integrations. And really, what we're talking about here is how to take things, outside of a single company and start to bridge integrations, between companies. So, the contractor using Procore and the architect using Newforma, we've been able to rely on a partner Revit to build the logic that can integrate these different systems together. So it's much more complex than moving emails out of the inbox to a storage location, but the contractor has different workflows in Procore, the designer has different workflows in Newforma. Translating these things is where the technology can really help improve the process.
And one way to think about kind of the role of these middleware integrators like Revit and others is, I was just thinking about anytime you go to a Starbucks and you hook up to the Wi-Fi, we all kind of should know by now that it's pretty risky to hook up to some of those systems. You want to turn on your VPN, your virtual private network, to kind of create that secure exchange of data. And so again, when you're exchanging data externally at the project level, having these third-party middleware can be a great, both from a retention standpoint, but creating that dual efficiency. So while it may seem more efficient to do a direct integration, it actually is just as efficient from a human resource standpoint, and it's actually more secure because it's going through that third-party exchanger. And so a lot of, and Aaron and I have been talking about this a lot, from both the architecture and the construction background, that really the challenge that we're facing is that the workflow is broken down, that we can have these digital integrations, but there's still sort of this one-to-one subcontractor to general contractor to architect and to owner, and we're not really all kind of having that one-to-many where we're really truly using that platform integration. So, I think that is just part of the reality of the challenge is that technology will continue to advance to allow us to get to this sort of a one-to-many common data environment, collaborative state. But there's a lot of other things that need to happen on the people and the process level to also make that happen.
Yeah, and I think the people and the process issues are actually much harder to solve than the technology.
That's what our organization's here for.
We've seen that. We see that every day, and the technology here is not a solution, or is not a technology is not a way to get the architect and design teams and the construction teams to not talk to each other, right? It's not a substitute for communicating what is happening.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of times it's looked at as an accelerant, can really push things forward. And so again, what we continue to come back to in these conclusions is that this really is a people and a mindset shift, in that, especially from a general contractor standpoint, it used to be looked at, this mentality of what gets measured gets managed. And as long as you set up standards and have enforcement that will get those results, but really all that's leading to is more administrative tasks, more breakdowns, and more frustration. So kind of the new mindset that we've learned through Lean and through other concepts, this comes from Eli Goldratt, of, tell me how you measure me and I will tell you how I will behave, is more this mindset of how do we start with empathy and understanding from general contractor to architect to owner of what is their perspective, what are their concerns, what are their goals, align those goals, and then figure out how to create measurements that will get us there, that align well with the technology capabilities.
Yeah, and I think this is a big challenge for Newforma this year with the release of our newer connectors, really trying to figure out how we help our customers use those connectors in a way that can help further this cause here, right? How can we get teams to communicate better, manage projects better, because the technology is not in the way anymore.
Yeah, and anyone who's been successful with Slack before knows that Slack can be a great tool when everybody uses it well, but if it's not understood how it's used, it can fall apart very quickly.
Great, thank you both. And just lastly, I believe you have proposed a framework. Could you walk through that framework to help today's attendees better understand, or maybe it's something that they can use to help instigate change within their own organization?
Yeah, so the first one here, defining your data requirement and your technology stack, is back to Aaron's point on kind of looking horizontally or internally to your organization. What data do you care about? How do you measure project success, and how are you ensuring that the data that you really need to have is clearly stated, and that you've got abilities to share that together. And as we go through those, those three, the different ways that they're articulated is through this CDX playbook. And so again, if those that are interested in diving much deeper into the analog to digital communications, the actual data fields within an RFI that are critical to electrical contractors and general contractors, and provide your 2 cents, especially for our architects and engineers out there. Would love more feedback on that. So you can go to constructionprogress.org/electri to download that. And thanks again to Electri International for funding this research and helping to progress this cause.
Great, excellent. Now, for those who may have joined late, you can drop any questions in the question pane, and we'll give you a few minutes to do so. In the meantime, I do have one question, Nathan and Aaron. What do you think are the biggest barriers to change, and what are the biggest or what are the greatest implications of not making any effort to change?
You want to take that first, Nathan? Or?
Sure, yeah. We actually just had an event we called the Construction Dorks Dorkathon, and brought together some mechanical and general contractor and design perspectives. And I think the big conclusion that everybody was realizing is that, one, we don't really understand each other's perspectives nearly as much as we think we do. And two, that so much of this challenge at the end of the day does come down to to the owner's perspective, the owner's understanding of all of this, and how that's going to start to shape contracts that will then align better cultures that will drive the behaviors and the process that makes all this technology really, take off in the digital age.
Yeah, I think a barrier that is near to me right now is again, people don't necessarily know that there's a better way to do a lot of things within construction projects. So trying to figure out ways to communicate with project teams, people that are actually doing this work day to day, that there are solutions and tools to a lot of the the problems that they have. Trying to communicate that out is definitely a challenge that we have.
Yeah, definitely the silos of information still do exist out there. And so the more we understand where those silos are and how others work, the easier it's going to be to start to break those down.
Okay, thank you. All right, it appears that we have a very shy audience today. I'm going to give everyone just a few more minutes or just a few more seconds to provide some questions. And if we can't get to them, or we can definitely reach out to you personally if your question was not answered. In the meantime, once again, I would really like to thank Aaron and Nathan for your time today, and for all those who took time out of your day to join the webinar. Before signing off, just a few items. If you do have additional questions after we end the webinar, feel free to send them to answers@newforma.com. And as a reminder, once again, a recording of today's webinar will be made available to all attendees. And it looks like we have no additional questions. So thank you once again, everyone. Be sure to register for part 2 of our Ask the Expert series. Our next webinar will take place on February 26th, and we'll examine why administrative workloads are still a challenge and what can be done to alleviate the burden on your project teams. You can register today by visiting newforma.com/webinars. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.